Hi, we're here at the home of Joni Nevitt from Burlington. Joni works at Heritage Bank, and she just took the trip of a lifetime. Let's hear Joni's story on this week's version of People of Northern Kentucky. Hi Joni, welcome to People of Northern Kentucky. Tell me a little bit about your background, your history, and your family.
Sure. I was born in Western Kentucky. I won't tell you how many years ago, but I lived there till I was about 30 years old. At that time, actually my kids were like 3 and 5 years old, and we moved to Houston, Texas. I enjoyed my time at Houston. I lived there about 6 years, and I like to say that, Houston's not a real pretty place, but the people are colorful, and I had great friends there and enjoyed that. Moved from there up to Rochester Hills, Michigan, then back to Houston, and I've been in Northern Kentucky for 20 years this July, actually. I have a son and a daughter. Jordan, my son, is the oldest, and Jordan lives downtown Cincinnati. My daughter, Kelsey, lives in Florida. She lives in Sunrise, Florida, just outside of Fort Lauderdale. And those two are definitely the light of my life. I couldn't ask for better kids. I'm very blessed.
So you work at Heritage Bank?
I do. I've worked for Heritage for almost 12 years now, and I totally enjoy my job. I always say that I never dread going to work. I really enjoy it. I believe in Heritage and their values, and I just work with a great group of people.
So what do you do away from work?
Outdoors. I call myself a nature freak, and I think I've earned that because I absolutely love to be outside. I've loved riding horses for years. One of my passions is junior achievement, and I began working through Heritage Bank with junior achievement, because Heritage has been a longtime supporter of junior achievement and their work in our local schools. So each spring there is an event, and it is called Guns and Grapes. Women from Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati will gather at Elk Creek Hunt Club and for a sporting clay event, which is now the largest in the U.S. for women and perhaps the largest in the world. But it's a great fundraiser for junior achievement. We will do several targets and have a half day of shooting and a lunch and a little celebration afterwards. So that's a very enjoyable event, and I've been on the board for that now since its beginning, I think, which was about 8 years ago. I also like to volunteer down at the parish kitchen. And I got started with that through Leadership Northern Kentucky.
So you took an awesome trip just recently. Tell me about that.
Yes, I'd be glad to. It's actually been a lifetime dream of mine to go to Africa. But through the years, the right opportunity just didn't seem to present itself. I wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like. But back in the summer last year, 2016, one day I was actually sitting right over here on my couch, and I was looking at, scanning the internet and looking at Africa, and I saw a trip come up that was associated with a fundraiser. Now that particular one, I did not know the charity, and so I just kept looking, and then I saw a trip that was associated with Compassion International. Now, Compassion International is a worldwide children's organization that promotes education and for children living in poverty all around the world. And when my children were young, I had sponsored a couple of children through that. So that piqued my interest. And talking about peaks, it was a climb to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, which I had not thought of really in the past. But immediately it struck a chord in my heart. So I contacted the group to see about the climb, and it was going to happen this January. And when I reached out, I didn't realize it, but it was a climb with a group of people from the United Kingdom, but they were still with Compassion International, led with Right Foot Adventures. And so we determined that that would be fine. I'd be the American joining the group. So I talked to a couple of my close friends, and I got their approval, or I guess I got their encouragement. And they believed in me more than I believed in myself. And then my next stop was a health coach that I know, Joel Hensley. Joel is in one of my business groups. And I went and talked to him. I was afraid to even mention it, honestly. And I'm like, can I do this? Can you help me do this? Can I, train for this? And bless his heart, he was like, yeah. He said, this is absolutely positively, possible. And we began the training, and then, the journey just grew. It was not a journey starting in Africa. It was a journey starting here in northern Kentucky. And I have a little girl over there that I sponsor in Tanzania, and her name is Lucy. And I actually, part of the package was I was going to get to meet Lucy. So after much prep and struggles with packing, that was an issue. In January, I did head over to Tanzania. And it started off really nice. They took us to a very nice hotel, and we had great food and lodging. And the next morning, we got up, and I got to go to the project that Compassion International has developed in that area. And that was overwhelming. I still find that hard to talk about without becoming emotional, because the people were so, I felt, friendly and loving and accepting and appreciative. And then whenever I met Lucy, I also met her mother, and that was one of the most moving experiences of my life. Just to reach out to someone that I never met, but again, we had that connection, and that they accepted me so. They could neither one speak English, but we still communicated. And the one moment that I'd really like to mention is we went into the church service, and Lucy was sitting by me and braiding my hair and doing all this. We were just having a great time. And her mother was sitting beside me. And, this is an adult lady, and I just didn't really know what she was thinking or what she was feeling. And I felt like just reaching around and giving her a hug too. And she melted against me. And that was when I realized that she probably needed that love and care and support, maybe more than Lucy did. And that the women in that area, there's a great need for support. Many of them are single and raising families alone. And that really touched my heart. And I got to see firsthand, I believe, through that day, and we did a home visit at one of the homes, the impact that just a small amount, what we would consider a very little amount that I give each month, it can make such an impact. That was very tough to depart after I'd just met them. But that night we had a dinner with some of the students that had been through the program, and I was so impressed by their love for their family, for their country, for bettering themselves and their community, and the education that they had went through. So that was a glorious day. And the next day we started for the mountain, and the rubber hit the road, kind of, you may say. We took a bus about 5 hours up to Kilimanjaro National Park, and after that it was feet-only travel. No more automobiles, no more running water, no more heat. The first day was probably about 5 hours. The next day was 6. The third day was the most difficult aside from the mountain. That was about 8 hours uphill. And I say it was probably the best thing I've ever done for focus, because in Africa, when you're climbing, especially as you're climbing in those altitudes, it's essential that you move very slow. So they have a little phrase, they say it's like pole, pole. And the guide said it, and you do a very slow walk. And the thing is that when you're doing this slow walk up these hills, you are looking at your feet the whole time because the terrain is challenging. You know, there are rocks and there are ditches. But after that day, it's like I felt the beginnings of the altitude sickness. And along the way, we all struggled different ways with that. But finally, on the Wednesday, which would have been the 5th day, we took the trek across the Aspen Desert, which is a desolate, barren patch of land. Traveled about 5 or 6 miles across that, and again at that little slow pole, and looking at base camp. And my favorite thing to say about that day is you see base camp when you leave, and you cannot get there. I mean, you walk and walk and walk, and it never gets closer, it seems like. So that was a challenge. So after the journey to base camp, you get back, you take a little nap, have a little lunch, take another little nap, have a little dinner, and then squeeze in maybe a couple more hours of sleep and get up at 11 o'clock that night to have your breakfast. Yeah, because at midnight we start the trek up the mountain. And that was a journey I don't think I'll ever forget. Absolutely, hands down, the most challenging thing I've ever done. The most rewarding, but the most challenging. And so the group started out and just stepping it out with our headlamps on. And I remember just starting up there and I was like, am I gonna be able to do this? It's difficult at the bottom of it because you're already close to 15,000 feet above sea level. And but again, it was just step by step, and the only thing that one can think about going up the mountain is looking at your feet and taking that step by step. And it's your mind that's your enemy. I mean, your body is hurting, and we were all in weakened states, you know, from the altitude sickness and different things. But at some point, I just had to shut that down and say, just keep stepping it out. Keep stepping it out. Kept moving up the mountain, and the first summit that you get to is called Gilman's Point. That's probably between 6 and 7 hours to the journey. But right before you get there, you hit Jamaica Rocks. And there are rocks and boulders, which is absolutely the toughest part of the journey. But all along the way, people would call out, or we would have a little break, and the team members would be there to support and encourage one another. And sometimes just hearing that, out of the darkness, you can do it. It was so encouraging. So it was definitely a team effort of the people there, the people here, and all those that, I call friends that were with me on that. And we made it over Jamaica Rocks. We got to Gilman's Point. And we were rewarded by the sun coming up. It was a cloudy day, but it was a beautiful, airy light. And at that point, you make a choice, really, whether to go on up to the summit. And sometimes that choice is taken away from you in a sense, because altitude sickness is a very real thing. And there's a process that goes on, although somewhat subtly, that the leader and our guide, the leader of our guides, they evaluate and see if there's really going to be a severe, like medical threat or whatever, and if not, you continue the journey. And that's what we did. I owe so much to to my guide that helped me, and that whole team of support that we had. So my tent mate and I had met up by that time. Rachel is her name. And so Rachel, myself, and my guide journeyed from there. And it was the most surreal experience. I just remember looking out, and there's snow. They're the edge of the glaciers you can't see because of the clouds, which are literally right out there because you end up being above the clouds. And there's an aqua color of the frozen ice, and then there's the brown of the ground because there's no vegetation or anything. And probably from Gilman's to the summit is about 2 hours. But somewhere along the way, people are coming down the mountain, and they begin to encourage you, like, you're going to make it, it's not too far. Well, not too far in Africa, it could be an hour or two, but it's still encouraging. And step by step again, a lot of pauses, but we finally reached the summit. And that's,
how did that feel?
I'm telling you,
moment when you reached
it was such a relief. 19,341 feet above sea level. And it was like, can I actually stand while you take my picture? And so we did. You start grabbing those photos, and you're frozen. I look at the photos. My hair is just a frozen mess in it, you know. It's so cold that even my eyelashes and my eyebrows are frozen. But it was just wonderful. Thankful, grateful. It's a very overwhelming moment. So actually right now there is talk. We are getting an itinerary together for maybe a reunion next April to go to Machu Picchu in Peru. So that's intriguing me. And I've also always wanted to do the walk in Spain, the Camino de Santiago. So I don't know. I have a few things out there I'm kind of looking at. We'll see.
Thank you for joining us today. Every Thursday at 10 a.m., get to know your neighbor by catching a new edition of People of Northern Kentucky.